Great political leaders risk unpopularity, patiently explain their case and confront prejudice, bigotry and vested interests. Commerce and politics do not go with royalty, full stop. The Arctic has huge glaciers, frozen waterfalls and floating ice. This is scenery on which man has left no mark, which has stayed unchanged for centuries, wild, bleak, hauntingly beautiful. It is a part of God's creation we have made no effort to tame. It is a truth universally unacknowledged at Westminster that there is life after politics. Secularism has no central goal, it's just promoting endless relativism. That's why there is a huge moral drift in the country. Everybody is infallible except the Pope, if you like. I left the Church of England because there was a huge bundle of straw. The ordination of women was the last straw, but it was only one of many. For years I had been disillusioned by the Church of England's compromising on everything. The Catholic Church doesn't care if something is unpopular. Usually my Easter reading consists of, Who Moved the Stone, which gets dusted off annually and read, often in one sitting, to remind me of the miracle of redemption, resurrection and life after death. The first visit I made to Australia was in 1996 when I was the prisons minister and was looking at other countries' penal systems. Cats are so wonderful because they're furry, and totally independent. Cats are ideal for politicians. I had two when I arrived at Westminster, Sooty and Sweep, who had come with a flat I had bought 6 years earlier in Fulham from someone who was about to go abroad. There was a better offer ahead of me, but she took mine because I would take the cats. We have no blasphemy laws these days, but with that freedom comes the responsibility which should always attend the exercise of free speech, truth, courtesy, and an awareness of impact. It is the last of these which is so neglected by so much modern comedy. I am a passionate opponent of fox hunting because the fox runs in fear of its life over a prolonged period, hearing the hounds getting closer and closer. Barbarous does not even begin to describe such a sport. What I do not like is militant secularism, whereby anything is acceptable as long as it's not Christian. I have always believed prison can be very, very good for you, but not by the act of deprivation of liberty alone. There has to be more to life inside than that. The state does not belong in bedrooms, so I'm not authoritarian. I don't say, you shouldn't do this, you must do that. What I do say is that the state must have a preferred model, and the model that has served us throughout the millennia is marriage, a man and a woman in a union that is generally open to procreation. My mother always said bringing me up was a tiring business, which I believe. For instance, when we lived in Singapore, the Chinese staff used to leave their slippers at the bottom of the steps. Every night, I used to go and remove their slippers. I stopped being tiresome at about 14. Always carry a handkerchief, especially in television studios. I was still in Parliament when the Labour government passed the Freedom of Information Act. As the then Shadow Home Secretary, I queried whether in some areas it did enough to open up the work of government to public scrutiny. Some books are like an hors d'oeuvre, light, tasty and leaving you longing for the main course which is never going to come, and some are like Christmas lunch immediately after a cooked breakfast. I don't analyze myself. Of course Meghan Markle wasn't driven out of this country by racism. It is a ludicrous claim and symptomatic of how ridiculous the must-be-offended-at-all-costs brigade has become. The child in the womb has no voice but Parliament's. Many MPs who voted for the 1967 Act did not think they were abandoning the unborn because they were fooled by the supposed safeguards. Now we know just how ineffective those safeguards are. On the whole, my disposition is to say yes, unless I've got good reason to say no, and I think that's being in public life. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. Example and general milieu, once considered so important in the nurture of children, are sacrificed on the altars of the false god we call free choice, but which imprisons us all in a collective moral paralysis and delivers an anarchy that the state itself shrinks from challenging. It's not a question of being out of touch or traditional. It's a question of wanting to preserve marriage as uniquely between a man and a woman. Gays get full civil rights with civil partnerships anyway. The political classes are despised when they deal in sound bites, embrace tokenistic campaigns and feather their own nests while trying to please all of the people all of the time. We need less political correctness and more political courage. After 23 years closeted at Westminster, where often all you can see out of the windows are other parliamentary buildings, I appreciate space, and I retired to Dartmoor to find it. I am not normally a fan of organized tours. Few public figures are, feeling themselves objects of constant curiosity. I am not an enthusiast when it comes to cities, preferring rolling scenery, wildlife and stars to museums, monuments, architecture and traffic. The postcode lottery means that the level of care you get differs hugely around the country, and the health service simply cannot meet every demand that is put upon it. Mice are everywhere at Westminster, but many MPs, including me, did not report them because we were afraid of their possible fate. Cats, unlike dogs, are independent creatures. They do not need walking and are content to be alone all day, providing they are fed. In 1999 my father died and my mother was coming to live with me, so I left my Kennington flat and bought a house with a garden because my mother loved watching the birds. Some of the finest comedies have chosen the church as its subject and would indeed make most Christians laugh, give or take the occasional wince as a barb goes home. I have very fond memories of Our Man at St. Mark's and long for the day when it is released on DVD, but I won't hold my breath. Gentle mockery or sharp satire aimed at Christians and their leaders have been replaced by abuse of Christianity itself. Stand-up comics tend to make two assumptions: that Christians have no sense of humor and that all their audiences are unbelievers. People wanted to protest, and UKIP's a conduit for that. I'd rather form my own party than ever join UKIP. We could call it the witty mob. I'm joking. I am a conservative. I'm never going to be anything else. I always said it was my ambition to have a library. I have one, and my dream was to have a pool. Then, Strictly came along. Insult is in the ear of the listener. Statements of fact cannot be insulting unless you feel that the label applied indicates some failing, moral or otherwise, in yourself. If someone calls you fat and you are fat, then it will be hurtful only if you feel you should not be fat. In my school days, I was titch, skinny and freckles. These days, I answer to Karloff, fatty, or even Twiggy from my more sarcastic friends. If they called me and I should wonder what I had done to offend them. The Home Office is a vast department where business as usual means that something is going wrong and, given the nature of the business, the disasters rarely lack a high profile. My detractors, who delight in using my name as a byword for unattractiveness, will find it hard to believe, but looking in the mirror is a pleasant experience. I am so used to seeing a blonde in the mirror that I forget that for most of my life I was very dark. Old photos are still a bit of a shock. Not even the severest critics of Jeffrey Archer can deny his style. I shall not miss the hectoring and backbiting and the lack of generosity towards fallen foes, but I will miss the sheer clubbability of Parliament. If one fancies a coffee or a meal or a drink, then it is always possible to find at least one person out of 646 whose company is congenial. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.